emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 862.GA0519, certificate number 12960. Oh, you kid.
Oh, you kid. Oh, you kid.
Is that how we're going to say it?
Oh, you kid.
See, you don't know what it means. You don't know how to say it.
Oh, you kid.
It has a comma and an exclamation point. This will be only the second omnibus entry that ends with an exclamation point, and you will think for a million years and never guess the other one. It was like our fourth show or something.
Was it?
We could just add an exclamation point to any of them. Beaver
that's
Castorium!
That's true. What was it? What was our...
It was a ill-conceived Nazi sitcom called Heil Honey, I'm Home.
Oh, Heil Honey, I'm Home. I remember.
So it's been like 6 years since we've trotted out the old exclamation point.
So I think my instinct in reading that sentence without context would be to say, oh, you kid.
Like, is it like you guys?
Yeah. Or, oh, I said it could also be like the sort of the...
Oh, you kid me. Like a kid could be a verb.
Yeah. Oh, you kid.
You kid. Surely you kid.
You kid.
I was perplexed by it when I saw it a couple months ago in a Daffy Duck cartoon.
Really? Was it a... Oh, I see. So it's kind of a World War II era, like...
We've talked about this, right? The Looney Tunes effect where from the... I mean, maybe up till today, from the 30s up till today, people watched the same Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Right.
And therefore, got to understand how World War II meat rationing worked.
Yeah.
And what a caricature of Jerry Colonna or Ned Glass looks like.
We all know the melody to The Barber of Seville.
Yes.
We
learned opera.
Yeah.
The only opera I know about, like on Jeopardy, came from Bugs and Elmer, probably. But I was watching Drip Along Daffy from 1951. It's one of the Western-themed ones. I think there's a few of these where maybe you've seen them. Porky Pig is kind of a Hopalong Cassidy kind of sidekick on a burro.
Yeah.
But Daffy's the Old West hero.
What does Yosemite Sam make an appearance?
No, I think a lot of these have... some other more generic outlaw character. There's like a guy with a mustache.
Yeah, sure.
Who shows up a few times. I don't know.
So much of the Looney Tunes takes place in the desert.
Yes.
But not typically with Daffy Duck. Daffy doesn't go to the desert.
And nowadays, of course, they would drop in the Coyote and the Roadrunner into the expanded Daffy Duck universe.
Yeah,
But at the time, they kept their hot side hot and their cold side cold. So Daffy's just having Old West adventures with Porky.
Yeah, the Old West was full of mice and...
Do you think they set a lot of cartoons in the desert because it's easier to paint?
Well, because they're making it in Los Angeles, so many of the movies were also set in the desert. It's probably a reference to all the Tom Mix.
Yeah, I mean, it's 1951. So Westerns are still the most popular thing in movies and soon to be TV. And this is one where Daffy rides into town and decides, there's an outlaw, and so he decides to become a sheriff. And at one point, he opens his vest. The gag is that he opens his vest trying to find a likely-looking badge, and he's got, World War II era chicken inspector things and a junior G-man badge.
Right.
And he
the golden man.
He plucks a sheriff badge, pulling the sheriff badge from his varsity sweater. But in there is a badge that says, "Oh, you kid."
Oh, you kid.
And I thought, oh, you kid? Oh, you kid.
Oh, you kid.
and I had never, I'd never heard of it before. And I went down, I looked it up, and it turned out to be a fascinating rabbit hole. And I thought, this being a mania, we love manias on
Yes, we do.
Omnibus, whether it's ferns or mulberries.
We love 20th century pop culture.
And this is something that had totally just been lost. Despite being the biggest thing of its time, no one had, with one exception, nobody had really thought about it in 80 years.
And I bet you when we were kids, we both watched that episode and took that in stride,
Right.
because there were so many, like you
didn't
say,
know.
references to Henny Youngman.
It's like, here's the adult world. Probably older than Henny Youngman. It would be some radio era guy, you know?
Yeah, right.
And we just didn't know. We're like, okay, this is what adult culture consists of, is people doing impressions of Al Jolson.
Yeah, when
this is-
Bugs
this
would
is 1980.
when Bugs would morph his face into different, Humphrey Bogart and so forth. There were
Right.
several of those people that I knew I should know that were like Groucho Marx era.
And some of them were icons like Bogart, where to this day you'll be like, he's
Yeah.
doing Bogart. But a
But
lot
like
of them were
Boris
just like,
Karloff.
they have one guy doing his indefensible anybody want a duck punchline that was popular for the 6-month period when that cartoon came out. And we think of it as, this is a classic. But today it would seem so hacky because it would just be, it would be,
a Doge coin.
Yeah, a Lizzo lyric or something. But let me ask you, what has been your approach? Have we ever talked about this? Has been your parenting approach to kids and media? Not all media, not all music specifically, is suitable for all ages, right? Or is your philosophy just throw them in the deep end of the pool?
Well, no, we've had a very restrictive philosophy, but not based exactly on what is suitable, but more based on trying to figure out what is good. And not just
like you're curating more than
for sure.
more than gatekeeping.
And I think a lot of parents our age had all kinds of lines like "No Elmo in this house," and a lot of people went against Barney the dinosaur.
But those are like aesthetics and maybe snobbish aesthetic judgments.
I mean, aesthetic in the sense that just Elmo's voice and the idea that I think a lot of it is at a certain point in the culture, the idea of children's programming was that you talk to children, like you talk to them in baby talk. Mm-hmm. And we grew up in a time when you talked to children in children's programming like you would talk to a young person, but you talk to them as adults. As an adult, you talk to them as adults. We watched Bugs Bunny, and he was making all kinds of very adult.
Even on PBS, Bill Cosby would just be like, I'm going to say the alphabet.
Yeah,
and of course, we didn't know he was Bill Cosby. We thought he
nobody
was
on
nice,
Sesame Street ever talked down to you. And there was some switch in the pedagogical philosophy. Elmo had all of this philosophical defense that what really makes children...
There must have been research.
Yeah, sit up and take notice. It's a thing that's talking to them like this. But there were all those television shows like Rugrats or whatever where it was jump cut after jump cut, and it didn't seem, to me at least, like this is what you want for a children's
Like
brain.
you're worried about their healthy brains.
Yeah, and just in the sense of like, and also you don't want to hear it in the house, just like squeaking.
I mean, that's the thing.
Well, but it isn't. I mean, I do believe that jump cut culture isn't as good as slow culture.
But
And
that's what my grandma said about Sesame Street, though, in 1970.
I
Like,
guess.
too many skits. What is this, Laugh-In?
But more importantly, like I always talk to my child as a grown-up.
Yeah.
And never went down and was like, I'm a little papa. I mean, when I was playing, but that was always fun and funny. It wasn't meant to be.
And you always had the sock puppet on your hand.
Yeah, well, I still do. But, there were parents that were like, no, you don't do papa, don't do cuckoo.
Right.
Even when the kid was 3 years old, and it's like, or 6 years old, and that just felt like bad culture.
It's hard to transition out of it.
Yeah.
You gotta future-proof your parenting.
And it's infantilizing, right? I mean, a kid that's talked to then learns to talk.
Teachers don't do that. Which means at some point, I hope.
Although some, I think, do.
Is it starting?
Well, I just think it's...
I've never seen it.
The thing about so many educational philosophies is it's where people who are the third-hand recipients of literary criticism pedagogy take, take an idea that might have been originally directed at Camus as a criticism of the work of Camus, and then, pretty soon they're applying some idea of it to children's programming or how you curate a library. And it's like, is this really science?
I was thinking more, there's that. And of course there's the, when can they watch the thing that will scare them? You're probably getting into that. You guys watch The Sixth Sense or...
We did, but not until a certain age.
What are scary but not gory?
My friend Josh Rosenfeld loves horror, but loves it as he's very into the thinking behind it. He thinks that he has a philosophy about it and what it does. And so his teenage daughter, who's the same age as mine, loves horror movies. We sat around a campfire the other day and talked about the Babadook for longer than I had ever talked about the Babadook before. Although
maybe in total.
Weirdly, I had read a couple of literary criticisms of the Babadook.
Well, that was what social media was for, to introduce you to queer readings of the Babadook.
Yeah, right. But my daughter has no interest in horror, and I also don't. I don't like to be scared. That's not a thing that activates a part of my brain that I need activated.
My wife viscerally cannot watch... even the most outlandishly phony movie Blood.
Yeah.
And she, and I'll be like, they didn't really cut off her fingers, Mindy. And she'll be like, I know, but she is just looking through she's covering her face.
Yeah.
And for whatever, I don't somehow have that. I'm a sociopath, of course, so I don't have that chromosome. And I love watching horror. But we have a friend who started a podcast about horror movies with his tween daughter.
Yeah.
And our kid was like, I don't want to watch The Shining.
But I made some real errors, I think, in saying to my, tween, let's watch this beloved movie from the time that I was a tween, which would be 1980.
And what did you find?
Well, that there was a lot of what we would now call cringe, which in 1980 was played for laughs. So there was a lot of what now would seem like abusive behavior or exploitative or like full-on creep. Did
I tell you did we talk about this? I rewatched Breakfast Club and it's a little upsetting.
Well, but Breakfast Club isn't for tweens, right? I think by the time you're 16 or 17, you should be able to handle all the material that's in Breakfast Club.
But you watch it today and you're like, well, she should not end up with that guy. He bullies her the whole movie.
Yeah, well...
Just like in life.
Yeah, go out and say that to 80% of the world, right?
80% of high school girls.
But, there's also he's talking about his abusive father, and it's pretty vicious abuse, and you understand oh, I see. Even then,
a cycle.
They're saying this is a child, he's abusive because it's in the system. But what
are you guys watching?
In Meatballs, for instance.
Why are you watching Meatballs?
Well, because I remember watching Meatballs at the age of 12 years old and just thinking it was hilarious, or Airplane, or and these were the movies. These were children's movies.
Yeah, even
right?
watching E.T. with the kids, you're like, oh wow, like you would just, 9-year-olds would swear so much back then in movies for other 9-year-olds.
Well, gee, Bad News Bears.
Right.
How old was I? I was 10 years old, and that was my favorite movie. Absolutely favorite movie.
Well, I think that's very telling because the kid is never like, I can't believe they just said the F word or whatever. Yeah. It's the parents who are
the stooges. But
vicariously freaking out.
The coach is an alcoholic who's drinking, passing out on the sidelines, and the kids are just vulgar. So
But would it ever occur to you showing a movie let me check and see if there's a sex scene in this movie, or let me see how much they swear in this movie? Or are you just kind of thinking, my kids have to operate in the world?
No, I do go to Common Sense Media.
Common Sense Media.
And I look at, because Common Sense Media has both, it's a nonprofit, and it has both adult reviews of movies and reviews from kids.
Oh, interesting.
And you'll often
So from, not for.
Yeah, you'll often have 12 them saying, the adults saying like, well, no kid should see this movie. And then a bunch of 12-year-olds going, yeah, there's a couple of scenes in it that are a little weird, but this is a really good movie and I would recommend it to. Generally, the 12-year-olds are like, I would recommend this for 13-year-olds. They're feeling superior.
Yeah.
Like, I could handle it, but like,
Maybe not all my peers.
I don't think all the kids can. My daughter for sure doesn't want to see any even remotely sexy scenes.
Do you think watching with you she doesn't, or period?
I think period, just because we as kids of the 70s, right? And I think of you maybe more as a kid of the early 80s.
Yeah.
But kids of the 70s, there was just a tremendous amount of sexualized content featuring teenagers. Mm-hmm. A lot of movies about losing your virginity.
I think Porky's was maybe the third biggest movie of 1982 or whatever year that was.
But like
mass culture.
Every movie in the mid 70s. I mean, Bad News Bears has a scene that implies that that Tatum O'Neal is going to get the little motorcycle boy into the team. And he says, they're playing pool for whether or not he's going to play on the Bears. Mm-hmm. And she says, if I win, you have to play for the Bad News Bears. And he's like, well, if I win, you have to do whatever I want. And she's like, deal.
Yikes.
But that's true in every one of those movies. I mean, there's Little Darlings stars like basically 13-year-old girls, and the whole movie is about them losing their virginity at camp. So my daughter is from a different era, right? There's zero sex in her life. And I don't just mean that because I have become a monk in my later age. And so she never, even sees kissing.
You and she have purity rings that you've exchanged.
But I think that's true for most of Gen Z, right?
Yes.
That the idea that kids have any exposure to sex that isn't completely encased in a conversation about consent and what are ultimately kind of adult themes, even like even more adult themes about birth control and so forth that they're learning at 8 years old.
It's all baked in to the definition
with this
of
sort of preemptive adult assumption that if a kid is terrified of sex when they're 8, that somehow will prevent the spread of disease and teen pregnancy when they're 13. So I don't know. I mean, it's like I'm sure you experienced. It's a complicated.
I just realized
thing to navigate.
When I was thinking about this, I realized I didn't have any rules. Like, I guess I knew don't show your kids something that'll give them nightmares. But I don't know if I could defend. You should not show your kid anything with swears, or you should not care if you show your kid anything with swears. Like I don't actually have a philosophy either way. But I remember talking maybe to I think it's my brother. He listens to the podcast. He could tell me if this is true. We were talking about the new Nico Case record, and he's like, oh yeah, I can't put it on in the car because she says the F word.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, he's got little kids, and he's actually thinking about what he puts on. I guess that's commendable, but I mean, like, to what end? You don't want the kids to parrot it at the wrong social moment, or you don't want to have the conversation where you explain that Nico says some words that we don't say in the house, or
we watched Beverly Hills Cop the other day.
Oh wow!
And I knew that there was no sex in it, and I knew the violence was pretty cartoony, and I knew that my sister watched it at age 13. But the movie starts off, and it's just the F word 60 times. Every single character is just saying it over, and it's a part of the conversation between Axel and his police captain, and they're just F-bombing each other. And it's for sure the most F words she ever heard in one setting, but she's 13. And so I was like, really? And she knows not to say it around here.
Right.
She would never say it to me.
You do make your kids compartmentalize.
But in 7th grade, I know kids are saying it back and forth to each other all the time, and have been probably for a few years.
Well, that's it's fundamentally different. Maybe the change was about 20 years ago, where at the time, I think, my wife's parents would, would rent videos and pirate them, but they would try to pause out F words. And Mindy was saying there's some scene of Better Off Dead where the kid is daydreaming about, like a condom breaks and the kid is daydreaming and accidentally draws on the classroom blackboard his girlfriend pregnant. And that scene is missing in the Bohm family copy of Better Off Dead. But but nowadays, you just know, like you almost feel like you're doing a kabuki of it, because obviously your kids can watch, you can try to keep them from violent movies, but they can watch all the Russian dashboard snuff videos they want, and they're probably curious. Any porn they're curious about, they can find. And of course, they're swearing up a storm in the group chat because we did when we were 9, so why would they be any different? It almost seems like you're doing a pretense of parenting when you actually know. Like Mindy's parents didn't know the babysitter was showing her risky business as soon as they left.
Oh, right.
But today we just assume, the kids can watch whatever.
What was interesting about the conversation she and I had after Meatballs, because during the scenes in Meatballs where consent, where there was peeping, and Bill Murray, who had always been played as a hilarious character, is putting all this real pressure on the girl to sleep with him. And it's very aggressive. It's very like non-consensual touch, a lot of stuff that I remember watching and thinking was hilarious, because she was like, no, I don't want to. And he's like, come on, baby. And like doing all this stuff that was very very Bill Murray. But now you could watch and go like, oh my God.
It's also rapey.
But she watched it, and I didn't pause it and say like, is this okay? I didn't, like, we need to talk about what you're about to see or fast forward through it. We just watched it, and I was watching her. But afterwards, we talked about it. And she already knew from her pretty extensive education in consent that she'd been getting since she was 6 in the schools. She already knew that was problematic.
Could she tell it was old-timey and...
No, she wanted to know, what the heck was that?
I see.
And I
You're
said,
not supposed to do that.
I said, well, it was, she was like, well, that wasn't funny. And I said, well, no, you're right. But the reason that we have those conversations now is that this was the culture previously. This is what I grew up with.
And that's why you have to hear.
Yeah, and we recognized from hearing from women later how intrusive and aggressive and resulting in really bad outcomes this kind of normalization was. And so we do this now, which is talk to you about it, and this isn't acceptable, and you should never laugh this off. But that was not difficult for her to talk about. It didn't ruin her, and seeing it didn't traumatize her. It was part of what, and a little bit, it's retroactive contextualization of why she's been told this from a time when like consent didn't have there wasn't any consent to what?
It's like showing kids Bull Connor spraying protesters.
Yeah.
It's not good, but it explains why you got the messaging you got about civil rights when you were a kid.
And I think often kids would learn that in her experience in grade school and have nowhere to apply it. So on the playground, they would get into these like, well, you just touched me and I didn't consent. So now it's an issue. Now I'm going to report you. This stuff that was, they had been given the language and they
knew the bright line.
Yeah. But then there's nowhere for it to go among 6th graders. And so it becomes, and I think that's part of the cultural conversation around it, because it's a little cart before the horse.
Yeah. How early? Yeah. Is it good to do it preemptively, or what about in music? The story of the rock era is just a series of moral panics about music destroying the youth.
I don't think I believe that music can destroy the youth, but there is, I think, a general sense of like, what is the culture of the music? What is its highest goal? Like, what is the music trying to teach you? And I think if you listen to sexy music that's trying to like teach you funk, teach you how to be funky.
Thank you, Prince.
Or Nile Rodgers, Like the ultimate goal is for you to be cool, right? And so much music is about being cool in the end. But if the music is, if what cool looks like is something that you end up not wanting to be, like why would you want to be that kind of cool? And that is a decision I make in terms of the music I listen to, right? Like I don't want to watch movies where people get hurt or where the hero sucks. And I also don't want to listen to music where the hero sucks. And so she's only been exposed around here to music that's like either fun or about the devil.
But she has other avenues through friends and TikTok, right?
She does, but she's still in like pop. I mean, there's some stuff that is, Billie Eilish doesn't shy away from intense topics. And honestly, Taylor Swift digs in to relationship stuff that's...
And it's a way that really resonates with those 13-year-olds.
Yeah. So they're trading that stuff back and forth, but they're not listening to any music.
They're listening to WAP or, like...
no.
I mean, Ariana Grande, 34, 35. I mean, these are the artists that the Taylor Swift fans should be listening to. And it's just kind of really unabashedly explicit, like sexual lyrics.
My daughter has never been called a hoe. And I think maybe this is part of the sheltering. Maybe doesn't know what being called hoe would even mean, right? Like she wouldn't be exposed to not just like actual pimps, but also like what that would mean in a context like as a playground insult or as a archetype.
Yeah.
And so listening to music that, that really doubled down on hoes, I think would be like a foreign concept, and embracing it would not, I don't think, be.
But what if it's not
healthy.
misogyny? The new direction would be kind of the forbidden taboo of female sexuality. That's what powers a lot of this stuff. Now it's no longer the ghetto boys rhyming, squeeze them and hold them with lick my scrotum or whatever. It's not like that kind of, street braggadocio about sexual conquest. It's really, women owning their own sexuality. It's empowering. You can't be against Cardi B.
Well, except that we go to so much trouble to gatekeep sexualizing young girls.
People, yeah.
And, and in their culture right now, like they are not having, as far as I can tell, at my daughter's junior high, there's like very little even dating, right? Obviously it's a sheltered community, but there's no one feels their sexuality is empowered exactly. And I don't know whether that's good or bad.
It's certainly the most interesting thing about this long history of moral panics is that all this worrying about the media environment getting, more and more explicit, more and more unabashedly sexual, more frank in every area. And what it led to was kids having less sex than ever. Like the Tipper Gore was right. That really was the direction, and we really were going to songs on the radio where people sing about their genitals all the time. Like it actually happened, but it did not actually lead to the downfall of the Republic or even kids becoming.
Well, except part of my worry is that that lack of sex is not due to a real healthy sense, a healthy sexuality in the culture of young people, but it's actually a product of fear of sex, overexposure to weird sex.
Yeah.
Like porn has weirdified sex and violence within sex to the point that I think a lot of young people are like, well, I don't want anything up my butt, and I don't want to get hit, and I don't want to be a hoe.
I think people expect it now. Like, well, is there a kind of sex that doesn't have choking? I hope. But
yeah, and that's
sad.
I don't want to wade into does video game violence increase real world violence, but it does seem that we went from this is normal sex and this is weird sex, to we need to not morally judge weird sex based on normal. We don't, anything
shaming.
Calling anything normal is not inclusive.
It's implying that something's abnormal.
But then what you get is, well, there's a lot of stuff here that I don't personally want anything in my bottom. I don't know if you do. I don't want to get into it.
Oh, sorry, are you asking me? Or is this a
Yeah,
hypothetical
you just looked
conversation?
across the with a totally blank affect, and I was like, "So where do you stand?"
Why are you presuming?
I don't know.
Why
I
are you-
don't know anything. But for me, like any kind of violence in sex is something. I mean, this is where consent really does come into play in a different way, where it's like, look, I don't, like we're getting to know each other and we're getting it on, and you are now coming out and being very honest about the fact that you would like to hit me as part of what you're turned on by.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling pressure to say, okay, you can hit me because you're being so honest, and to say no, you can't hit me is a form of kink shaming. But I don't want to be hit. And that's a conversation that 14-year-olds don't have the sophistication to have. At 50 years old, it's a hard conversation.
Well, the moral panics about music in the past never got to that level.
No, how could
nobody
they?
was ever like, hey, is the sexual content in this song, is it sex positive? How is it for young girls? We never got to that point. It was really like, is there sexual content in this media? Because if there is, it should never be on the radio.
Prince actually stopped playing some of his early erotic city stuff later on in his later tours. He was like, there are a lot of kids at my shows now, and I don't want to play this like humping music. But there's no talk about his, he's not talking super explicitly. At the time, it seemed like it was super explicit. He's inside your sugar walls.
I mean, Darling Nikki, I guess you could say she was a sex fiend. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe when I heard that about Darling Nikki.
I know, and I think
She's in a hotel lobby. She needs to maybe have a little more privacy.
it was bleeped, I think.
Yeah, there was a lot of bleeping. I had this when I was looking into these past moral panics. I had this flashback to watching Tom Petty sing "You Don't Know How It Feels" on MTV or VH1 in the 90s, and they would actually censor the part where he says, "Let's roll another joint."
Yeah.
So he would say, "Let's roll another," and then maybe they would play it backwards, like "Nyep. Let's get to the point. Let's roll another." Nyep." I wonder what he's rolling.
Yeah.
It rhymes with point, but we may never know.
Yeah, it could have been like joint in your ankle. Like, let's roll another joint, ankle joint.
There's not a lot of words that rhyme with point, are there? Anoint?
No. Yeah, but that doesn't make sense contextually.
No, it's not a noun.
Roll another.
The old ones are very funny. Like you remember, like the Everly Brothers, "Wake Up Little Susie" was banned in Boston because the guy stays up with his girlfriend all night, even though the song is more explicit than any other rock song in history about how they didn't have sex.
Right.
Like the lead singer is like, "We fell asleep because the movie was so boring and didn't have sex," and the city of Boston is like, well, I mean, he doesn't say we didn't have sex. He says, "We fell asleep and now your parents are going to be mad." And the city of Boston is like, you can't have people falling asleep at the drive-in.
But I mean,
what will that lead to?
By the 70s, like Neil Diamond had "Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon" and "Sweet Little 16." I mean, there were so many songs in the 70s that were about
I guess
young girls.
I guess they were okay with subtext.
Yeah,
And the ethics of it were not.
The idea of being a 24-year-old singer and being in love with a 15-year-old fan was culturally normal.
Every song, yeah.
Right.
She was just 17, you know what I mean.
It was
Oh,
not.
do I?
But it wasn't considered an aberration. It was considered a kind of like sexy taboo, but not one that would make, say, for instance, Ted Nugent a felon. Although he should be in a variety of
for
crimes.
different reasons. Yeah. But the moral panics over, Louis, the FBI doing a 31-month investigation of Louis, because what if they are saying something untoward?
Weird that only the kids can hear.
But that really did advance through, like, what are the music moral panics you remember from our lifetime? Like,
Well, Two Live Crew.
right, Me So Horny.
That was, the
one went to
PMRC. And of course, all the backwards masking of Judas Priest and the Devil. The Devil was still a big thing in the 80s.
We already did the Devil show.
Yeah.
This is the crotch show.
But by the 1990s, Kurt Cobain seemed like he was in trouble all the time, but nothing really stuck.
It was gangster rap by the 90s.
Was rap.
It was Cop Killer and
right. All the anti-cop stuff.
And F the police. I had forgotten that Ice-T actually backed down. That the label, I think Warner, the conglomerate, muscled Warner Music into muscling Ice-T to pull Cop Killer from the Body Count record, and he just did it and said, "Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and I don't think
Cop Killer represents my real feelings."
Yeah, which is, it's true that he had played a cop in New Jack City, but there's a defense for all these things.
Colors.
It's funny. We were just doing that the other day. I cannot hear the word colors without saying
colors.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I've been doing that for 40 years.
Like the defense of Cop Killer was that, when Eric Clapton did I Shot the Sheriff, nobody fainted.
Right.
Because he wasn't an urban black man, It's only when urban black man.
It's a slightly different context.
The
right?
vibe is different.
Yeah.
It's a little more instructional in Cop Killer.
And and it wasn't Clapton that wrote "I Shot the Sheriff," right? It was that he was covering a Marley song.
But I think like maybe Ice-T would have agreed with the critics of Cop Killer and its defenders basically had the same take. Even Ice-T was like, this is a protest song. Right. I'm singing this because I do believe that there should be more discussion of police brutality.
Yeah.
And the people who were angry at the song were like, we actually, Ice-T is like, we should sing this song because I don't like the police. And his opponents are saying, you should not sing this song because you do not like the police. That's not a fair viewpoint.
And I think a lot of that transition was that what authenticity in music became was that it became journalistic, that it was describing the experience of people on the streets in the disenfranchised people in poor neighborhoods, people of color, and their experience of authority. But it was meant to be very journalistic, and that was the defense of even the worst stuff in it, the most brutal stuff. If you can't handle it, this is the truth of the street, and that is part of the cultural, reappraisal of society, of class, and that wasn't true of. Like, all that stuff is also discussed in the blues and in soul music. James Brown is talking about all of that stuff, but it's encoded, it's put into a dance, it's made, in a lot of ways, it's directed at a knowing audience so that white suburbanites can listen to I'm a Man and be like, yeah, but, a black audience is going to hear that in a very different way.
Yeah, there's very little encoding now. The innuendos are very, very easy to figure out, whether they're sexual or about violence or social issues or whatever.
But that journalistic, the assumption that it was that the music is above reproach because it's reality. And even when it's kind of like, we see this a lot in culture now where it's like an exaggerated reality, but even when the exaggeration is caught out, novelists or rappers, what it turns out like, you went to prep school. And so, Eminem really, he calls out in 8 Mile, whoever the bad guy is. What's his name?
The character in the movie?
Yeah, the character in the movie who is like, yeah, Clarence. Clarence had real good parents.
It is Clarence, huh?
Yeah, whatever.
He's cheating. It's cheating to name your character so that they rhyme better in your fake rap battle, your pre-written rap battle. Come on.
But the idea that even exaggerated, it still reflects the streets, and so therefore the reality makes it
right
somehow immune to criticism, and that's an evolution in music that is, maybe not subtle, but it's significant enough that it inoculates it to a certain degree, certainly from criticism by you, middle-aged white guy.
Right. And that's the problem with when I look at these things. Coincidentally, I think all the moral panics about the music I liked were silly and overblown, and Alan Cranston or whoever should have stayed in his lane. But when I read pop lyrics today, I'm like, really? 12-year-olds are listening to Cardi B say this? So,
But I don't think,
I'm very suspect.
I think that's often, and I see this a lot, and I think we all do, but I think it's a false equivalency. Like, is there no thing that's too bad? Is it all equivalent to, like, oh, well, if you didn't like Led Zeppelin's,
It's very easy to say Socrates was making these criticisms about the youth of Athens.
Yeah, and so
therefore you can never criticize
contemporary musicians,
any culture given to the youth.
Yeah, should be describing anal sex in music that's being played at junior high proms. I mean, and that's a little bit moral panicky of me to describe it that way, but one does wonder.
Yeah, like the criticisms could just be because it's always getting worse.
Right. I mean, it's not just like born again Bible thumpers who are saying, like, culturally, where are our limits? There's, even plenty of members of communities of color are also saying, wait a minute, I don't think this accurately reflects not only the street community, but also, like, what are our aspirations for ourselves? Does music have an aspirational? Should it be in some way aspirational? Is depicting reality, and reality in quotes, the highest goal that we should, or the moral standard we should apply to art?
Somehow I forgot that you would come at this from the musician and the composer and the performer's point of view, which, I had never really, I'm thinking of this as a critic and a listener.
Right.
And it's a little bit different when you're thinking, well, is that what a song should do?
Yeah. What are we trying to, because music is the most powerful art, right? It puts things in your head, and it's very rare that you read a poem and then can't get it out of your head. Right. You never read a book and then walk around just like, this thing, I can't stop hearing
reciting it.
But music can take you over. And so should it be, it has tremendous power. So whether or not it should do or not, as an artist, you have to be conscious of the fact that you are employing a shaping force. You have a scimitar, like a flaming sword that you can use. And past a certain point, like, yes, it has been used for social good and for social ill, but it can also just be used very corrosively.
When I think of, like, what's the granddaddy of this kind of, moral panic over sexualized song lyrics, I guess I always just assumed it would be the blues, some crackly old wax cylinder of Shave 'Em Dry with just kind of shocking anatomical stuff you would not expect from the early 20th century.
I mean, that stuff was just the actual rhythm of the music, duplicated the rhythm of sex.
Now,
so just like
now you're buying into all the Parents Christian Council stuff from 1958.
Well, I'm not saying that's true, but that was the initial panic, right? It was not even the lyrical, just like.
But I mean, there are even though they're not as well remembered today, there are extremely explisite blues songs from that time that are not even like wink, wink when I get home. It's really more like. Here's a song about my penis.
She squeezed my lemon.
Yeah, it's Robert Johnson.
But it's still just enough, it's just enough that grandma could be like, oh yeah, she's squeezing a lemon.
But look up the lyrics to Shave 'Em Dry. There's no lyrics. It's the equivalent of Cardi B. It really is just like, let me list some parts of my body and then I have some suggestions. But in fact, I think, those come from an oral tradition, but most of those songs had popularity in the 20s and 30s.
And it wouldn't have been on the radio. First of all, there wasn't a radio.
Exactly.
But
in fact, like, I think the first American panic over is popular music getting naughty is like a decade earlier, and it's like Tin Pan Alley Irving Berlin kind of culture.
Right.
It's the story of "Oh You Kid." We're at the 1 hour mark, so I thought we would try to get into the.
We can't really
the
be.
song.
I don't know. We're only 45 minutes.
Oh, see, no problem. We'll just bang the rest of this out.
Oh, that's dirty.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Mark will bleep it.
We don't say bang anymore.
Tin Pan Alley
Bang a
was, I don't know, they still call it the Flower District? West 28th between 6th and 7th in New York is where the songwriting publishing industry was.
They don't still call it the Flower District, but I bet you there's a new condo building
That's called
called
Flower
the
District?
Flower District. Yeah.
Yeah, all the awful new buildings have floral-themed names. Because the songwriting was huge then, like it was just the infancy of recorded music. I think we've discussed this before, which means that the money was not in selling recordings of music. It was, vaudeville artists who could perform them live. But more importantly, how many copies of the sheet music could you sell to people who would then go home and on their pianos just love to tinkle away because that's how you listen to music. You sang around the piano. You did not run out and get a wax cylinder.
And who was sitting around going, "Oh, you keg women, you better put it on the wall" in 1928?
Exactly. That was a little bit underground. The origin of the name Tin Pan Alley is interesting because it's a little bit disputed, but one of the main figures in our story today, an early Tin Pan Alley songwriter named Harry Von Tilzer.
That's dirty just by its. That's like a dirty pen name.
It's like a Mel Brooks character or something. It's not real. He was Aaron Gumbinski, born, Polish-Jewish immigrants in Detroit. When he turned out he had a knack for show business and songwriting, he moved to New York and became Harry Gum. I think he was a, vaudeville singer. He was a song plugger. Do you know what that is?
Song plugger.
In an age without recorded music,
you would go around and say, check it out?
Yeah, you really needed to hustle. You needed to demonstrate the song. So if you went into a music store, which at the time did not sell CDs, but it sold sheet music, you would want somebody on a piano to be able to sing the song for you. And so that was what the song pluggers would do. And in fact, they would, he had a thing where he would show up at a vaudeville show and pretend to be seated in the crowd, and then he would
stand up and say "Hey,
you know what we should sing? The new hit." And he would run up on stage at, kind of a wrestling angle. He was a real hustler. And I think his, Jerome Kern, Irving Berlin, George Gershwin, all these guys started out as song pluggers, but Tilzer actually predated them all. And in fact, hired Berlin. He was like Irving Berlin was his protege. Wow. That's how early this is.
And so song pluggers then would go into songwriting because they would.
Yeah, well, they're trying to promote their own. He's a publisher as well. Berlin worked for Tilzer's publishing. I guess at some point he changed from Harry Gum to an even more. I guess it's the same thing Irving Berlin did. He picked this kind of Germanic sounding last name, and he took his mom's maiden name, which was Tilzer, and added kind of a Prussian aristocratic von to sound a little fancier, and he became Harry von Tilzer.
Do you think that some of that was to mask what would have been a Yiddish accent?
Yeah, I think so.
There would be an immigrant accent.
Yeah, I could be a German immigrant, and that's a little. It's why all the what is it? The Bernsteins became Bernsteins.
Yeah.
So they sounded a little more Gentile. And that's why Leonard Bernstein always wanted to be Steen once he was famous. He was proud of it, not like my haberdasher parents or whatever.
Back to the
Aaron Gumbinski was so influential that I think all his family followed in his footsteps. Many of them changed their name from Gumbinski to Gum. And in fact, it was his brother Francis who became a vaudeville star and whose daughters, the Gum sisters, also took to the stage.
It's a pretty unusual name, and you could.
It's not you wouldn't change your name to Gum. But the punchline of the Gum sisters is that one of them changed their name again to Judy Garland. He was Judy Garland's uncle.
Cool.
She was Frances Gum, I think, when she started out. And his other brother, Albert, actually wrote Take Me Out to the Ball Game under the name of Albert von Tilzer. They followed him to Gum and then von Tilzer as his name changed. And he wrote songs we still sing. He wrote... It's hard to think that there's many songs from the pre-World War I era that we still sing today. But
not hard for me because I'm a product of the Victorians.
And you're always singing George M. Cohan songs as you walk down the street.
Our family songs are Does the Spearmint Lose Its Flavor? We still sing that. We sing Coney Island Washboard. and we sing.
Are any of these I mean, the chewing gum is not pre-World War I.
I think they might be 30s songs. And what's the other one?
Coney Island Washboard is 26. You're
Okay,
getting closer.
26.
Mills Brothers, right?
Coney Island Washboard, she would play. I taught this to my daughter when she was 4 years old.
Well, it's perfect because they're in the public domain. So
there you go.
We can sing all of them all the time.
Although one of our family songs I included on the first Long Winters record, Shantytown, there's a shanty in Old Shantytown.
Uh-huh.
And I remember when we put it on the record, it wasn't yet in the public domain. And so it's not listed on the song. It was a hidden track.
Wait, can you get away with that? You don't have to pay the rights holders?
Well, I'm outing myself right now, but it didn't,
look out.
Because it wasn't on the title card, nobody ever
Hey,
found it out.
Shantytown Inc., you need to track down this scofflaw. No, Harry Von Tilzer wrote, "She's only a bird in a gilded cage. I want a girl just like the girl that married dear old dad."
Oh, yeah, we did that
It's
one.
a little creepy.
Yeah, well.
Green grass grew all around. That's kind of become a
Green grass grows all around.
that's like a
Well, that's actually
kindergarten song.
No, but the green grass grows all around is actually hat tipped. It's quoted in There's a Shanty in Old Shantytown.
No way.
Yeah. Green grass grows all around. Oh, the roof's so torn, so badly
And
worn.
the song that is today still apparently the theme song of the New York Stock Exchange, although I don't know why the New York Stock Exchange needs a song from the 1910s.
What?
Wait Till the Sun Shines, Nelly.
It has its own theme. Well, that's very flattering to the stock exchange.
That it has a theme song or that it's got a crazy old...
That if you're sitting there crying and tearing up your sheets, that's like, wait till the sun shines, Nelly.
The sun will come out tomorrow. Von Tilzer's story when he worked on Tin Pan Alley was that the origin was that all the pianos were close enough. All these songwriters were working in these little tiny spaces next to each other. You would always hear everybody else's songs, and if you didn't want anybody stealing your melodies, you would have to mute your piano somehow. So Von Tilzer and others would, I guess, stick cardboard between the strings of the piano to kind of muffle the sound.
And did that make a tack piano or no, not a tack piano. It would be like a...
Yeah, it's got a real kind of percussive, one might say tinny sound. And so Tin Pan Alley may in fact come from the sounds of all these muffled cardboard stuffed pianos of guys trying to keep their ideas
You're kidding.
from going out the window. And because I guess theft was rampant.
I super like that.
Because you stole Shantytown, of course you
I did,
You're a thief.
but I also really like that that's where Tin Pan Alley came from.
So plagiarism being, and not plagiarism in a legal sense, but everybody was just following the trend. What's going to be the next bestseller? Irving Berlin's early hits, like Alexander Ragtime Band, is a ripoff of a kind of a minstrel show, a blackface style song that Von Tilzer had written about a guy named Alexander.
So we do McNamara's Band. That's another one of our family songs.
Oh, that's very old, right? That's
McNamara's Band, ba-da-da-da, boom, boom, ba-da-da-da.
The big recording is Bing Crosby. That's 1889.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's very early for Tin Pan Alley kind of music.
I mean, it does reference General Grant, and my daughter always.
That's how you know it's a contemporary.
Yeah,
it's a very current song.
She always loved that we were talking about when General Grant went to Ireland.
So the story of plagiarism is very important to what happened to the OU kid moral panic.
We're at 53 minutes now, so
yeah, we should maybe start to just dance around the edges of it a little bit. And the reason I know all this, once I saw the Daffy Duck cartoon and had to figure out what OU kid meant, luckily, a journalist named Jody Rosen had done a deep dive on the song and the resulting craze.
Thanks, Jody.
For Slate in 2014, which I'm going to lean on heavily here. And it, everybody else who has written about this since, NPR, BBC, everybody is pretty much, speaking of plagiarism, is just following in Jody Rosen's footprints here. But if you enjoyed any of this, please look into his work. That's not Daffy Duck. That's
Donald, right?
Yeah, Daffy Duck would just be lisping.
Yeah,
but OU Kid doesn't have any
Kid.
S's.
No, there's no lisp.
In 1908, two songwriters named Edgar Selden and Melville J. Gideon write a song called OU Kid.
Melville J. Gideon. Why are there no kids named Melville J. Gideon?
He's a con man from a I don't know, a Horatio Alger book or something. The song is very simple. A kid, I think, is kind of new. I mean, there had been out, a kid met a young person like Billy the Kid,
right,
or the Sundance Kid. But the idea that it would be kind of a joshing term of endearment to your girl, I think, is kind of new. Just like baby was showing up in a lot of these songs in new usage at the time. So it's a very simple song. Oh, you kid, come now, say you'll let me cuddle closer. Nod your head, but don't you answer no, sir. Oh, you kid, I mean every word I've ever told you. Kiss me quick or else I'll have to scold you. Oh, you kid. So, I mean...
Sexy.
It's a little bit hot. It's got cuddling and a quick kiss.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of a wholesome, it's young people on the porch.
Yeah, he's got a straw boater on, and she's like, oh, titter, titter.
Before my aunt comes around the bend and sees us on this park bench.
Do you like Kipling?
So it's not naughty yet, but oh, you kid, apparently for whatever reason, becomes a catchy new coinage enough that other writers would want to put this in their kind of funny courtship songs. This song was a pretty big hit. It sold 100,000 copies.
Of sheet music.
Of sheet music, exactly, yeah. But songwriters realized there was something catchy about the phrase, oh, you kid. So the following year, on May 3rd, 1909, the date will be important.
Mm-hmm. A date that shall live in infamy.
Two other songwriters, Harry Armstrong and Billy Clark. Harry Armstrong actually would go on to write Sweet Adeline.
Really?
Yeah, so he's a big name. They write the song, I Love My Wife, semicolon, but, comma, oh, comma, you kid, exclamation point.
Oh, I love my wife, but oh, you kid.
So here's the turn. Now it's not two sweethearts on a porch or in a park. Now it's somebody with a wife at home.
Sure, creeping up on some...
But it's a little story song. Here's what happens. First verse. Henry Green had family troubles all his married life. Mm-hmm. Every night he'd come home late, he'd get jawed by his wife.
Oh, jawed.
So we've got henpecked Harry.
She's such a jar.
A friend one night said, come on, Henry, let's go in and dine. And at the table next to them was a lady sipping wine.
Okay, so she's already a bad girl.
She's got wine instead of sarsaparilla.
Yeah, ginger beer.
She looked at Hen and sighed. I guess it doesn't scan if you say Henry. Maybe you should have named him something else that could have been plausibly one syllable.
Jim.
She looked at
Ben.
Hen and sighed. Hen looked at her and cried. Chorus. Well, I love my wife, but oh, you kid. Oh, you kid. Oh, you kid.
So she's flirting with him. She's a temptress.
She looked at him and sighed.
Yeah. Oh, and sighed.
Yeah. So
she's batting her eyelashes at him.
You've got me clean off my lid, and I'm dead gone on you. You bet your life. I could love you in the summertime, wintertime, rain or shine. I love my wife with all my life, but oh, you kid. So now there's a new twist.
I'll say.
Which is, oh, you kid now means it's kind of a ... ellipsis. I love my wife, but...
But this is popular because this is an ancient problem. The affair.
Adultery.
Yeah. But
it has never been treated in popular music in a playful way, apparently. Like songs about broken homes were always sad and mournful and think of the children. Right. And this is very much like...
Well, he's resisting the impulse because he loves his wife with all his heart,
and I think that's the veneer of...
Right.
Of...
respectability.
Of respectability that puts the song over. He does love his wife, but oh, you kid. It could go either way. It could mean... But I'm sorely tempted because you're such a cutie, patootie.
Yeah, you can still fall in love and yet remain faithful to your wife. He's not saying, oh, you kid, let's get a hotel.
It could mean I love my wife, but if I weren't married... Whoo,
that's what I would take it to mean.
But it could also mean I love my wife, but since she's not here...
But I'll love you in the summer and the winter.
Exactly. Love the one you're with. But there's a turn that also keeps a veneer of respectability. In the second verse, we read, Henry made himself acquainted with the lady there, called her over to his table, had her take a chair.
Oh, don't do that, Henry.
Soon there was a great commotion. Hen let out a scream, for looking up, He saw his wife had walked in on the scene.
Oh, and she's got a frying pan in her hand.
As she dragged him to the door, they all heard Henry roar, and then we hear the chorus again. Well, I love my wife, but oh, you kid. Apparently, he keeps at it while she's dragging him by his hair out of the hotel.
Yeah. I mean, the love
restaurant.
your wife part, I bet he said. I doubt he was telling her that he loved that kid.
Well, according to the chorus, he continues with all the summertime, wintertime, rain or shine. So now this is kind of a funny, kind of a very catchy title. I love my wife, but oh, you kid. But the song is apparently No Great Shakes.
Oh.
And
It's not a hip melody.
Right. It's not a hit. And in an era of open plagiarism, a mere, 9 days later, on May 12th, 1909, that's when Harry Von Tilser and a credited lyricist who, may have just been a favor that he tossed a lyrics credit to Jimmy Lucas, they improve it with a much nicer chorus. And now it's, I love my wife, but oh, you kid.
There it is. That's all you needed.
That's it. And this one does not have the turn. Now, Jonesy was a married man. Oh, yes, he was. Sweet girlie on the single plan. I guess she was. So
Sweet girlie on the single plan.
really slang heavy.
Yeah, so she's unbetrothed.
And maybe on the single plan means no intentions.
This is
maybe she's
1909.
1909.
So
Maybe she's
pre-flapper.
yeah, but she is apparently, if she's on the single plan, maybe
Well,
she's a free spirit.
She's a Gibson girl.
She's not angling for a husband. She's giving come hither looks. to everybody.
She's a city gal.
Jonesy stopped and spoke to Gurley, just as old friends often do. By the way, to the modern eye, why does he get a name and she doesn't?
Well, she's a girly.
Spoke to Gurley, just as old friends often do. And he said, I'm married, but that but, my dear, means you.
What?
So we've even got a... So not only is he unapologetic, but there's a little butt pun.
But there's not a second T in the
No,
lyrics.
but butt would have meant rear end to a savvy audience.
Even then, yeah. Okay.
I love my wife, but oh, you kid. For my dear wife, I'd give my life, but oh, you kid. So you've got the funny kind of, I'm a married man, but oh, you kid.
Yeah.
Now, wifey dear is good to me, a wrong she never did. I love my wife, but you
this
kid.
isn't denigrating the wife quite like the first one either. It's not saying the wife is a henpecker.
No, but it's almost worse.
Yeah,
it's almost
much
like
worse.
I'm in a happy marriage, but I'm on the road. Girly.
Well, those Gibson girls with their upswept hair, their mussy bun on top of their head, pretty tempting, even now.
Now, to me, it's having read that, it's not clear to me, first of all, why it would be such a catchphrase that Daffy Duck would have it in his lapel 40 years later.
Okay.
But also, it's not clear what kind of objection could be raised to a song who's about a man who loves his wife. But you get that "Oh You Kid" in itself could be a shocking flirtation with infidelity.
Yeah.
But this song immediately becomes a huge hit. And the funny thing is it did so without any kind of hit recording. There are recordings of it from the following years. The baritone Arthur Collins did a successful version of it. But mostly we know this from ephemera. Jody Rosen kind of went into junk shops and went through LexisNexis for old newspaper on microfiche. And what he finds is within a month, there are puns being made on the "Oh You Kid" catchphrase in Des Moines, Iowa newspapers. And by the following year, there are novelty neckties, buttons like Daffy Duck's, little China figurines of, a flirtation going on that says, I owe you kid. There's dishes. There's single reel motion pictures adapting the funny "Oh you kid" catchphrase, and just thousands of slightly naughty picture postcards of the kind you can imagine. A girl in a very demure bathing costume and a guy in a bowler hat saying, but oh, you kid.
So what's interesting is that sheet music, when I think of sheet music in this heyday of it, you would buy and take home to the family piano and everybody would learn it. But you're not going to do that. You're not going to bring "Oh You Kid" into the home and have your wife and kids sit around and sing it with you.
Well, maybe young people can. I think it's a hit on campuses. Let's see. They had to ban it from the Yale campus.
Right.
I guess one morning, everybody awoke at Princeton the following month only to find somebody had painted "Oh You Kid" in bright red paint on the walls of the theological the chapel of the theological school, the divinity school.
Because it's a come on, right?
Yes.
If you were wearing an OU Kid tie, you're basically saying, I'm ready, I'm single and ready to mingle, or I'm married and ready to mingle.
But it can still be a saucy vaudeville hit. It can still be something that everybody
Played
sings.
in taverns.
And this is the thing. This is the dawn of ragtime. And a lot of this music is being played in saloons.
Right.
It's being played in brothels. And this is in part what leads to the condemnation, because there's also a racial coding here. You know, the ragtime is syncopated. It's self-evidently black music. And that makes it very suspect on the other side of the tracks. Like
jungle music,
this
sex.
is the intermarriage of, you know, the intermingling of the races is going exactly the way we said it would. There's now syncopation in popular music. Can you believe it?
Drums.
Exactly. And so in a time when, you know, more staid popular music might have been a little safer, this was the province of ragtime.
Right.
And by summer, within the year, the song is just everywhere. And it's kind of, it seems to be the kind of thing where the phrase just gets used kind of irrespective of context. You know, other parody songs just start to, the idea of a snow clone where a certain phrase just appears in every variation as a kind of a substitute for a joke.
I can has cheeseburger.
Exactly. But if you don't even know that, you could say I can has other things.
Yes. Happens all the time, even still.
Yeah. And so there were a bunch of parody songs that could be adapted to any circumstance. Like, I love my pipe, but oh, you Pippin. I love my horse and wagon, but oh, you Buick. Mm-hmm. I love my wife, but oh, her family. So there's novelty songs of a novelty song,
right?
Espousing different point of views, but because everybody knows the OU Kid joke, the reach extended to the White House, Rosen writes. This is, I guess, the equivalent of the correspondence dinner. Oh, the gridiron dinner. Is that still a thing, or did that die in the Trump era?
Oh, maybe.
When President Taft arrived, everybody started singing, we love Roosevelt, but oh, you Taft. They were very lucky to have a one-syllable president at the time. And then there is, let's see, it shows up in ads. It gets translated into Esperanto. A man in Philadelphia, presumably drunk, leaps from a bridge across the Schuylkill River shouting, I love my wife, but oh, you kid. A confusing suicide cry.
Well, no, not if he is in love with a younger woman and she has rejected his love, and this is the end for him.
That is what Louis Reese told police. He said he was intoxicated, loved a girl, and didn't give a hang.
He survived.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, he landed in shallow water and was quickly rescued by a bridge workman. But he was arrested and charged with attempted suicide.
Yes. Still illegal to this day in most places, right?
Yes, only if attempted. It's very hard to prosecute when it's successful.
Right.
It was graffitied on a newlywed couple's honeymoon cabin. Very naughty. A prankster. There's all these funny old, just little squibs from regional papers. A church in Geneva, Illinois, where the hymnal had been vandalized by a prankster so that, this is what the paper says. Oh, you kid, the stale ditty of the 3-cent theaters in the vaudeville houses was hashed into a sacred anthem in Geneva, Illinois recently with disastrous results to a prayer meeting at one of the churches.
It was hacked,
says the Chicago Record.
It's maybe the first hack.
I think it says hashed, but that's not a usage of hash we use.
But still, yeah, sure, because you mash it in, it's a hash.
This seems fake.
Maybe.
The pastor had closed his exordium and announced the solo. The young woman lifted her voice into song. She put so much fervor into the music itself that she followed the words blind and sang the anthem exactly as it had been revised with pencil. She sings, I love my God, I love my God, I love my God. But then she slavishly follows the vandalism and sings, but oh, you kid.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Satan has invaded the temple.
Satan wins. The prospective converts gasped and then guffawed, and before order could be restored, the shocked and scandalized pastor dismissed the meeting without waiting for the benediction.
I mean, it's interesting that one of the problems with presentism is that you forget that there was talk of, gay culture was present. Sex culture was present. There
were dirty jokes. They just didn't survive.
There were women's rights. I mean, all these things were true in 1909. And this would have been, the fact that this was like swept the nation kind of reveals that there was already what is Dan Savage's latest term? Not polyamorish. It's monogamish.
Yes.
Monogamish.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the reality was everybody knew who was stepping out on their spouse.
Right.
And was
this kind of normalized it.
Right. I mean, there were two kinds of backlash. One was just people that were sick of the catchphrase.
Yeah.
Because it seems to have been, once it becomes ubiquitous, it kind of it's almost like maybe the closest thing is that's what she said.
Yeah, right.
Where
oh, you kid.
It's not bad, it's got a little leer in it, but it's not obvious enough that you can't say it in front of the children. But then it just gets dropped in everywhere, even beyond the original kind of strained comic context of it, almost like an SNL catchphrase.
It's funny because that's what she said swept my daughter's school this year. And
do they know how to use it?
Yes. And it is remarkable how often, I blush at it. And I'm like, don't you say that?
How dare you?
That's outrageous. And I think they love it for that reason. But you can employ that. If somebody's like, oh, it's all stopped up, we'd better plunge it. And some seventh grader's like, that's what she said. It's like, no.
I think OU Kid could be deployed in almost exactly the same way.
Right.
Dropped in to make anybody kind of blush. And so you would have editorials like this one. If anything was lacking, but there it isn't, to prove that New York is the biggest yap town in the universe and entitled to the appellation of the Rube City, it could be found in the acceptance of such slang phrases as OU Kid.
Oh, New York.
Meaningless jargon that it is, utterly bereft of any glimmer of common sense that would appeal to the intelligence lurking in the noodle of a newborn doodlebug.
It's such Skibbity, Ohio.
No, this is actually, wait for it, the Walla Walla Evening Statesman complaining about fancy big city slang. The phrase has been taken up and perpetuated by millions of the human insects that have their burrows in the metropolis.
Walla Walla, population 1,400.
But actually, there was a lot of serious grappling with the song from, as you would expect, clergy and social reformers. So we already talked about kind of the racist anti-ragtime angle, but you could also find editorialists inveighing against the Hebrew song mills of Tin Pan Alley.
Okay.
So it's
Wow.
There's an anti-Semitic reason to.
Well, it's the same as today, right? The Jews are trying to undermine society
there's a powerful conspiracy
combining black rhythm and their anti-Christian lyrics.
Here's an article from American Magazine, the only called "The Decay of Vaudeville." It really is, so there already was this feeling that this is a seamy side of society.
But vaudeville was already a seamy side of society prior, right? Vaudeville would have been 20 years earlier the dangerous, gross.
I mean,
sex pit.
When does I think this is kind of the height of vaudeville if we're talking about 1910. Yeah,
I guess so.
I guess it's kind of early. Vaudeville started in the 1880s, so we're on the downhill slope, but it's at its peak here. But yes, the decay meaning that right. It was already a little on the fringe. The far more pernicious evil of suggestive songs and lewd lascivious jests goes quite unheeded by the authorities. What could
the authorities do?
It is a fact that if your wife or your daughter goes to a vaudeville theater at the present time, the chances are at least 75 in 100 that she will hear some jest or some song that reeks of the barroom or worse. So what could the authorities do? This was actually tested many times. Let's see. There was a Missouri farmer who sent a postcard to a young woman that had the "I love my wife, but oh, you kid" catchphrase.
And he was clapped in irons?
Yes, he was hauled in front of a U.S. district court in Missouri and threatened with 5 years imprisonment.
For vulgarity?
Yeah, mail, because the mail was federal.
Of course.
There were still
obscenity
laws. And Rosen uncovers a half dozen other cases like this where the legal system got involved in the "Oh, you kid" panic. Let's see. At a court in Pittsburgh in the fall of 1909, a magistrate ruled that any man who shouts, "Oh, you kid," at a woman on the street, even though she should be his own wife, should be whipped. The magistrate said he would not find any man who administered the whipping. It's not clear if there's actually a case here or if the guy's just announcing preemptively that the horse whipping is allowed.
That seems like an invitation to violence.
It happened again in L.A. where a petite and pretty young woman named Marie Durfee assaulted a man after he said, "Oh, you kid." So people were using it as a wolf whistle.
Yeah.
And when he assaulted it, the police court judge sided with Durfee, ruling the salutation, "Oh, you kid," is a disturbance of the peace and is punishable by 90 days imprisonment in the city jail. So this thing that just seems kind of bizarrely quaint to us was actually getting people thrown into jail. And in fact, the following year in Atlanta, a man named George Lambert, a railway company executive, shot another man named Bassett after Bassett came up on the street and said, "Oh, you kid." It is believed Bassett will die, said the wire services. Lambert, the railway executive shooter, surrendered, but was at once released.
Whoa.
So, I mean, I'm sure there were other, this kind of come on followed by an act of violence, I'm sure had happened before and happened after, but not with song lyrics.
What's really interesting is that there are tons of moral panics right now in the United States, right? Like trans people reading books in libraries has got a whole segment of the population just absolutely up in arms.
Insistent that we should, in fact, shut down libraries to avoid this happening.
Like flabbergasted.
Libraries should not exist.
And yet there's almost no focus on song lyrics at the moment.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I did not see, even when, a song like WAP was at the top of the charts, I did not see Like a Prayer or Two Live Crew style headlines from anybody.
No,
parents groups.
There's a list as long as your arm of things that even the slightest inkling of will give people fits.
And it's totally catchy stuff that 7-year-olds are singing on the bus.
And yet, song lyrics are just not what they are worried about right now. They're worried about pedophilia in pizza parlors.
What do you think happened? Are we just inured to it? Like, did they take the L? Like, yep, I guess all pop songs are about sex now. Very graphic sex.
Maybe so. I mean, I feel like it's been so long since the first instance where a song was just like, well, if it didn't work with Like a Prayer, and this is, these lyrics we're letting this one slide, then it's, or maybe there's no going back.
Or do you think the culture is just fragmented enough that
maybe that's it.
The people don't. I mean, even though Cardi B's got a #1 hit,
it's not on their radio station.
Yeah, nobody's listening to Top 40, and so
they just have their own playlists, and it's not an issue. How strange.
But in 1911, Billy Sunday is on the radio, just or in his big revivals, just excoriating, "I love my wife, but oh, you kid. These are things of the devil," he says. "Things driving audiences to sin and hell," which led to another song called "I Love My Billy Sunday, but oh, you Saturday Night." The songwriters just jumping on the current events.
Yeah, right. Saturday night is when you cheat on your wife.
So, I guess one possible takeaway here is that, and this often is used when these rock era moral panics come up, is just to say that they're all faintly silly. That, we did nothing actually did happen, even though "I Love My Wife, but oh, you kid" was a big hit.
But, a cultural crusader would say,
it did happen.
It's been a steady decline ever since "Oh, You Kid."
No Fault Divorce was a direct result of "Oh, You Kid."
That's right. And now everybody is, we're on the verge of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it's a direct line from this to Shave 'Em Dry to, Cardi B.
I guess it does end at a point where the songs can't get any worse, where
it ends is dogs and cats sleeping together, mass hysteria, right? It ends where there's, and weirdly, we're seeing, like you say, a total decline in sexuality in Gen Z in the sense that they just are like, no, between rough, violent YouTube sex and 1,000 different layers of consent.
But maybe if they just had suggestive Tin Pan Alley double entendres, maybe that would bring sexy back.
It might be that's what she said. And that concludes Oh You Kid. Entry 862.GA0519. Certificate number 12960 in the omnibus. Futurelings, there is no social media anymore of any note or repute. It's all a vulgarity, and that's too bad. Oh, you Twitter.
Where is Billy Sunday when we need him? Complaining about the degeneracy and the gradual destruction of mankind wrought by social media.
Well, there are a few places, a few sanctum santorums.
Speaking of Dan Savage.
And one of those is Facebook, and another is Instagram, where you can go to @Omnibus Project and see wholesome and not at all medicine, not at all meddlesome or
Meddlesome. I thought you were going to go menacing. I had no idea what that was going to be.
It's not menacing either. So go search for Futurelings. Go search @Omnibus Project, and you'll find family-friendly material. You can also look for @Ken Jennings and @John Roderick, although who knows what you'll find.
Hard to say.
You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can send us actual physical mail like OU Kid buttons that up until now you didn't understand what they meant, that you were going to throw away with your grandfather's effects, to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. And
I have some mail here, in fact.
What do you got?
We got some postcards.
That's a big postcard.
It's very long. It's like a CinemaScope postcard, I guess because it's the Great Sand Dunes National Monument. This is maybe the best postcard intro I've ever heard from Ben. On our way home from Great Sand Dunes, we listened to the Somerton Man show in which both of you remarked on your lack of association with murderers. I am not so fortunate.
Whoa, Ben knows some murderers.
He knows how to start a postcard, this guy. He says he's worked with two. One's on Arizona's death row right now. The other's awaiting trial in Fairbanks. Dark. But in my capacity as manager of Coldfoot Camp, I hope we're allowed to out Ben as the manager of Coldfoot Camp, whatever that may be.
Coldfoot Camp.
I received correspondence from another, Keith Jesperson, serial killer of at least 8 women, wrote to us.
Whoa.
What is Coldfoot Camp if serial killers just send them unsolicited mail?
Coldfoot Camp is on the Dalton Highway outside of Fairbanks, and it's like it was originally a pipeline construction camp.
Oh.
So those towns along the way as they were building the pipeline were called.
But if he's he's the city manager, or is it still a working oil something?
Well, I think now it's probably because it's up there. There's a place where the Dalton Highway stops, and then it becomes the road to Prudhoe Bay that used to be oil company access only.
Yeah, this explains why Keith Jesperson is writing. He's a fan of ice road truckers.
Well, there it is. And so it's like, I think Coldfoot is like down from the mountains, and it is probably, because the pipeline in going over those mountains, it's really an incredible construction feat. This is a super digression, so I'll stop there. But that's what I think Coldfoot is.
Well, I mean, it's true. Serial killers must have lots of spare time if they can just write to the settings of all the reality shows they like.
And what did he want?
To applaud ice road truckers. He told them that he himself had driven 18-wheelers when he was younger. This is interesting. He referred to his crimes as mistakes of youth and told us he had taken up art in prison.
How many people did he kill?
At least 8 women, it says.
Well, that seems like more than a mistake.
Multiple mistakes.
Yeah.
Keith sent us 2 colored pencil drawings, one of a moose and the other a really freaky dog. Thank you for that peek into the mind of a serial killer,
Yeah,
Ben.
thanks, Keith.
Chilling only because it's from Coldfoot Camp, Alaska. Tim in Arizona sent us, for some reason, a postcard of the Wes Anderson movie Asteroid City.
Mm-hmm.
He says, if you think about it, isn't any place one day going to be Asteroid City? That's a little dark.
Whoa,
but
easy.
Yes. And Derek was in Siena. He bought this postcard to send to his brother, But just as he started writing, the cafe started to play. Do you want to guess what started to play at a cafe in Siena, Italy?
Oh, you kid.
That is correct. No, present colon ensign accusal.
Oh, good.
And he took that as a sign that instead his brother should go without, and he should send this postcard to us. I guess he wrote to us from Trieste, and we read that on air. He's a Patreon supporter, possibly because we read his Trieste postcard on air. Wow. So maybe we should just read more postcards.
Yeah, and all those people will join.
Hey, Asteroid City guy, time to pony up. And P.S., maybe we should do a show on the, am I reading this right? It's called the Polio of Siena, that horse thing.
Oh.
It's in that Bond movie.
Yeah, didn't we? Well, we did the Lippenzahner horses.
I don't know if we ever did.
I spent hours researching the Lippenzahner horses and then never did an omnibus on it.
We never did. You were just doing that for fun.
I guess, like so many things.
Or you were just dreaming about
I know an awful lot
Lippenzahner's?
about them now.
Well, you could. It's not too late. I mean, in this show, it probably is. We're probably an hour and a half in. So maybe not now, but sometime. Lippenzahners, why not?
Futurelings, the last thing I want to recommend, and Ken has foreshadowed it, is you should join our Patreon at patreon.com/omnibus project. You will make everything in the world go just a little bit more smoothly. That's our promise to you. Everything in your life your lawn will green up. Your fat dog will lose weight. Your spouse will stop hectoring you.
Your spouse will come back. Yeah, exactly. Everything gets better. Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that among the things that never come is a catastrophe we fear. Better? Yeah, I like that. Among the things here is a list of things never come. That may never come. If the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.